there, curious minds, and welcome to The Deep Dive. We're the show that digs through stacks of info to bring you the most fascinating nuggets, all distilled down. Before we jump into today's topic, just a quick note. If you love getting well-informed quickly, like we do here, you've really got to visit Mind Expansion Daily. Please do like and subscribe to Mind Expansion Daily. It helps us keep bringing you these deep dives. And hey, if you really appreciate what we do, maybe consider buying us a coffee. The link's right there in the description. We also genuinely love hearing from you, so challenge yourself. Leave a comment, tell us if you agree or disagree with our summary today, and let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. We're trying to expand our reach, worldwide. Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're heading way up north to a place many might not know, but its story. It echoes a critical global challenge, Norilsk, Russia. Imagine a city deep in the Arctic, a vital industrial engine, but simultaneously, tragically, one of the most polluted places on Earth.
It is this stark contrast that's immediately gripping, isn't it? You've got Norilsk, nestled 200 miles north of the Arctic Circle, its origins, a Soviet labor camp, founded way back in 1935. But today, its massive mining and smelting operations, mostly run by Norilsk Nickel, they're responsible for, get this, 85% of Russia's nickel and 70% of its copper, 95% of its platinum group metals. Huge amounts. Yet, like you said, this economic power casts this absolutely devastating shadow. So our mission today really is to explore this mysterious and frankly troubled heart of Norilsk. We want to uncover the immense environmental and human toll, trace its historical roots, and crucially examine the ongoing efforts to combat this severe pollution crisis. And we're looking at this as of August 19, 2025.
Right. And here's where it gets, well, really interesting. When we talk about pollution, Norilsk truly sets a grim benchmark. So what are the key indicators, the things that highlight the sheer scale of this environmental crisis?
Well, the numbers are staggering. Let's start with air pollution. As of 2024, the city's smelting complex, and this is the world's largest for heavy metals, it emits 1.3 million tons of sulfur dioxide annually.
1.3 million tons.
Yes. Now, okay, that is a 24% reduction from 2023, which is something. But just to put it in perspective, it still incredibly exceeds Norway's entire industrial SO output by 140 times.
Whoa. 140 times Norway's entire output. That figure is just mind-boggling.
It is. It really challenges our idea of, industrial scale and responsibility. And this gas, the SO, it creates this persistent kind of sulfurous haze that often leads to hazardous air quality warnings.
I can only imagine. Is there any other single industrial site on Earth that even comes close to that level of SO?
It's truly exceptional in its concentration, and it's not just the SO Euro. A 2024 report showed PM2.5 levels averaging 50 micrograms per cubic meter. And PM2.5, just to remind everyone, that's the really fine particulate matter, tiny stuff that gets deep into your lungs, into your bloodstream. Very nasty.
Okay, so 50 micrograms per cubic meter. How bad is that?
That's 10 times the World Health Organization's safe limit. 10 times.
Wow.
Then you have the water pollution, equally severe. You might remember the Daldican River. It famously turned bright red back in 2016.
Yeah, I remember seeing those pictures. It was shocking.
Exactly. A real visual shock that got global attention. That river carries heavy metals, copper, nickel, cobalt. Concentrations have been reported at 60 times above safe levels, even out to a 60-kilometer radius. Local lakes, which were once, full of life, they're now basically lifeless.
So air you can taste, rivers running red, it's almost apocalyptic. And the soil, too. I read something incredible about that.
You probably did. The soil contamination is so extreme, so concentrated with metals from decades of fallout, that mining the surface dirt for platinum and palladium is now actually economically viable.
That's just perverse, isn't it? Mining the pollution itself?
It absolutely is. A grim feedback loop. And the landscape reflects this. Around 1.2 million acres of forests were dead by 2007, just from SO Euros exposure. People describe it as a lunar landscape, just barren.
Okay, the environmental stats are just staggering, almost paralyzing. But behind these numbers, there are people, over 100,000 residents. And there are Arctic ecosystems. So what does this environmental nightmare mean for the people living there and for the wildlife? What's the human cost?
The human toll is profound. Deeply concerning. Life expectancy for factory workers in Norilsk. It's 10 years below Russia's national average. The average is 73, so
10 years shorter, that's significant.
hugely significant. And about 30% of all residents report respiratory diseases, chronic stuff like asthma and bronchitis. A 2024 study linked 15% of local cancers directly to exposure to these heavy metals.
15%, directly linked.
Directly linked. And children face particularly high risks. It's heartbreaking, really. They have a 44% higher chance of blood disorders compared to other regions, and a 38% higher risk of neurological issues.
Ugh.
Then you have the workers on the front lines, like waste pickers, miners. They're constantly exposed to toxic dust. They report 80% higher rates of skin and lung ailments. It's just a constant assault on their health.
It sounds like a population constantly under siege from their own environment.
Eh,
And the wildlife. What about the ecosystems?
It's an ecological collapse, basically.
Yeah.
Species that used to be common there, reindeer, Arctic foxes,
Yeah.
they're now nearly extinct locally. The acid rain, mainly from the SEO, has sterilized the soil. It prevents regrowth.
Mm.
And the fish, 90% of fish populations in nearby rivers have been wiped out, decimated.
90%.
Yeah. There was actually a social media post in 2023 that got a lot of traction, about 12,000 likes. It vividly described Norilsk's rivers as dead zones. And that really highlighted the global concern about this level of destruction.
It's just hard to fathom how things could get this bad, how a situation could reach this point. So let's look back a bit. The historical context. How did Norilsk even get here? What were the roots of this crisis?
Well, the toxic legacy really began way back in the 1930s. Norilsk was literally built by Gulag prisoners. Forced labor. They constructed the Norilsk Mining and Metallurgical Combine to exploit these huge copper-nickel deposits found in the 20s. By the 1950s, it was a crucial Soviet industrial center. Smelting operations just kept expanding, with basically zero thought for the environment.
Right, production above all else in that era.
Exactly. Then came the post-Soviet privatization in 1989. That led to the formation of Norilsk Nickel as we know it today, and it is a global leader in non-ferrous metals. It contributes about 1.5% to Russia's entire GDP. It's massive.
But the environmental regulations, they lagged way behind, seriously behind. In the 1990s, only about 10% of emissions were even being monitored.
Only 10% monitored. Yeah. So you had decades of, negligence. And that was starkly underlined by that huge diesel spill in 2020. Remember that? 21,000 tons spilled into the rivers.
Okay.
Norilsk Nickel ended up with a massive $2 billion fine for that one incident.
$2 billion, that's a huge fine, but it also shows the scale of the neglect. So we've seen the devastating present, the toxic past. What are the main things driving this crisis today? Why is it still ongoing? Is it just the sheer scale of the industry, or are there other factors keeping the system locked in place?
It's really a combination of things. A perfect storm, you might say.
Mm-hmm.
At the very core, it's the industrial practices themselves. Smelting these sulfide ores, that's the process that releases all the metals and sulfur. We're talking 500 tons each of copper and nickel oxides annually, plus that massive SEO output we mentioned. The Nadezhda smelter, just one part of the complex, is responsible for 97% of Norilsk Nickel's total emissions. And outdated equipment across the board just makes leaks and inefficiency worse.
Okay, so the technology and process is a big part. What else?
Well, that's enabled by weak regulations. Russia's Environmental Oversight Agency, Rosporodnadzor. It's their version of an EPA, basically. They only issue fines for about 5% of violations reported.
Only 5%. Why so low?
Often, it's suggested political influence plays a role, or simply the enormous economic importance of the company. Which brings us to the next point, economic dependence. The entire city basically relies on Norilsk Nickel. The company employs half the city's workforce, 50%.
Half the city works for the company. Wow.
Exactly. And with $17 billion in revenue in 2024, the company has huge leverage. It allows them to, let's say, push back against or delay stricter compliance and costly reforms. The city's livelihood is tied to them.
A classic case of economic power potentially overriding environmental concerns.
Precisely. And finally, don't forget the geography. It's isolation. This is the high Arctic. Temperatures drop to minus 47 Celsius. Minus 47. Those harsh conditions make infrastructure upgrades, implementing new, cleaner technologies, incredibly difficult and extremely expensive.
Right. Building anything, there must be a massive challenge. So given all the history, the industry, the weak oversight, the isolation, what's daily life actually like for the people there? How do they cope? And are they, fighting back? Is there a resistance?
Daily life is pretty grim for many. The air often has that sharp, sulfurous taste. It stings. Black snow in winter is just normal. Imagine that being normal.
Black snow.
Yeah. 70% of residents report regular throat irritation. Just breathing is an issue. And in the slums near the smelters, where about 20,000 workers live, access to clean water is a huge problem. Yeah. Around 60% of those households rely on contaminated sources. It's a really challenging existence.
It sounds incredibly tough. But you mentioned resistance.
Yes, absolutely. There's incredible resilience. and activism. In 2024, a local group, they call themselves Clean Norilsk, organized a protest. They were demanding stricter emissions controls. Their campaign got 10,000 shares on social media, bringing attention to their fight.
That's great to hear. Community voices rising up.
Definitely. And it's not just protests. There are community-led solutions emerging, too. Some community cooperatives are actually recycling about 10% of the industrial waste. That supports around 500 families, turning a negative into a small positive. And activists like Elena Petrova, she's a former miner, she's organizing health clinics. They serve about 1,000 residents a month, stepping into the gap.
That's genuinely inspiring. Real grassroots action.
It is. But there's also deep frustration. A staggering 80% of residents feel neglected by the authorities, and reports suggest only 30% of the aid promised since that big 2020 spill has actually been delivered. So it's tenacity, yes, but against the backdrop of persistent disappointment.
Okay, so we've heard about the community's struggle and resilience. What about the big players? What are the authorities, the government, and the corporate giant Norilsk Nickel actually doing about this? Are there concrete signs of progress?
Well, Norilsk Nickel has taken some steps. You have to acknowledge that. Back in 2016, they closed an old, particularly dirty nickel smelter. That single action cut SO Euros emissions by 30% within the city limits.
Okay, 30% is a noticeable chunk.
It was. And more recently, they launched this big initiative called the Sulfur Program 2.0. It's a $1.93 billion investment started in 2023. It has shown some results already. They've reportedly reduced emissions at that main Nadezhda smelter by 45% as of early 2025. The ambitious target is a 90% cut there by 2027.
90%. That would be huge if they achieve it.
It would be transformative for that specific plant. The program also included installing 16 new monitoring stations, and they are publishing real-time air quality data online, which adds a layer of transparency. However, a big caveat. Upgrades planned for their copper plant have stalled, apparently due to international sanctions affecting equipment supply. So progress isn't uniform across the whole operation.
Right, so some progress, but hitting roadblocks. What about the government's role? Are there initiatives making a difference?
The Russian government has its Clean Air Initiative. It's part of a larger $5.5 billion national environmental plan. The original goal for Norilsk under this plan was a 75% euro reduction by 2023 compared to 2015 levels.
Right.
But they only achieved about 12% reduction by 2022, so a huge gap between the target and reality.
Only 12% when the goal was 75%. That's not great.
Not great at all. And there are plans, long-term plans, to relocate the smelting operations outside Norilsk altogether by 2030. But these face significant funding issues. Reports indicate only about 20% the needed $4.1 billion budget has actually been allocated so far. So you can understand why community skepticism remains high. That 2024 poll showing 65% doubting the government's commitment. It makes sense.
Yeah, promises are one thing, funding and action are another. This whole story, though, incredibly localized to this one Arctic city, it feels like it must have broader lessons, right, for the rest of the world?
Oh, absolutely. Norilsk's crisis, while extreme, is definitely not isolated in principle. It mirrors the kinds of industrial pollution challenges faced in cities all over the globe. Think of places like Linfen in China, historically, or other heavy industrial zones. The lessons learned in Norilsk, or the lessons that should be learned about retrofitting old, dirty plants, about the power of community advocacy, the importance of real-time, transparent monitoring. These lessons could benefit potentially an estimated 500 million urban residents worldwide living in areas with significant industrial pollution.
500 million people, so it's not just some remote Arctic problem, it's a template almost.
Exactly. It's a stark, real-time case study of the long-term consequences when industrial development goes unchecked for too long. It resonates far beyond Russia.
Are there tangible solutions then? Things we see potentially working or things that could work, that could be scaled up, not just in Norilsk, but globally?
Yes, there are definitely potential solutions with wider applicability. Take methane capture, for instance. It's a technology already used pretty widely, like in 60% of U.S. landfills. Applying that effectively to Norilsk's waste and industrial processes could potentially cut their overall emissions by maybe 40%. The health cost savings alone could be enormous, perhaps $500 million annually, just from reduced respiratory illness.
Methane capture, okay. What else?
Well, even scaling up Norilsk Nickel's own industrial waste recycling model could have a global impact. Remember those community co-ops recycling 10%? If that kind of approach was adopted more broadly by similar industries worldwide, you could potentially reduce global industrial waste by maybe 10 million tons a year. These aren't sci-fi ideas. There are existing methods that offer a path forward.
Right. Proven technologies, proven approaches. It shows change is possible. So let's try to wrap our heads around this. What does it all mean? Norilsk's story, it's just such a powerful, maybe painful reminder of this complex dance between economic ambition, environmental health, and ultimately human well being. The scale of the pollution is hard to grasp 1.3 million tons of SO Euros every year, rivers with heavy metals 60 times over safe limits. It really paints this picture of a city built quite literally on a toxic foundation, endangering its 135,000 residents and just devastating the surrounding ecosystems.
And if we connect that to the bigger picture, Norilsk isn't just some faraway problem. It really is a potent living example of a long-term fallout from unchecked industrial growth. You trace it from its gulag origins right up to its current status as a global industrial giant. The environmental and human cost is just immense. We see 30% of residents with chronic health problems, local wildlife pushed to the absolute brink. And while, yes, initiatives like the Sulfur Program 2.0 offer a glimmer of hope that 45% euro reduction at one plant by 2025 is real progress, the overall pace, the stalled upgrades, the funding gaps, it all demands a much, much greater sense of urgency. Urgency that seems to be lacking. Which I think it leaves us with a really important question.
Given this immense economic power wielded by industries like Norilsk nickel and the undeniable human and environmental costs we've discussed, what truly effective levers do global communities or even individual consumers actually have to compel change, especially in situations where local governments might be slow or perhaps unwilling to act decisively? What's your take on Norilsk's ongoing fight, and what can the world really do? Something to think about. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We really hope this gave you a clearer, maybe more nuanced understanding of Norilsk's complex and challenging reality. And hey, one last reminder, if you enjoyed this and want more great, well-researched information, please check out Mind Expansion Daily. Do like and subscribe there. It genuinely helps us keep producing these deep dives. And if you're feeling generous, that Buy Us a Coffee link is in the description. Every little bit helps. We really want to hear from you too. Drop a comment, agree, disagree, let us know. And tell us where you're listening from. We're excited to see our global reach grow. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.